clicking. You've 90 days. You'll get your music kicking. Your friends will be amazed. It's 50-90. That's why HFO is here. It's 50-90. It's 50-90. Shall we try that again? Oh boy. Why is it you think you've got everything sorted out and then it all goes pear-shaped within a minute of clicking start streaming? I need a drink. Good evening, Mel. Good evening, David, who have both already arrived in the chat room. Don't harass the Harris. Yeah, indeed. Actually, I'm not feeling that harassed. I've had a good day. I'm nice and mellow. I've actually remembered to eat before broadcasting tonight. So, hello. Welcome to HFO TV. First of a new series of streams. This stream is going to be about taking part in 50-90, which is a songwriting challenge that's run by the same people as February Album Writing Month. And what it is a challenge to songwriters of any ability to write 50 songs in the 90 days between July the 4th and October the 1st. So we've been going for, roughly 36 hours so far. There's 147 songs posted on the site already, which I think is absolutely awesome. So there are people who just record stuff on a guitar and sing, and there are sad nerds like me who have a room full of geeks. I'm totally aware that this is not normal behavior for a human being, and I've been doing this for 40 years. I mean, normal human beings do not have a full Marshall stack in the corner of the back room. It's a bit loud in here. In fact, David asked earlier in the week what I have the volume settings at, and I usually have them set at a half. Forget going up to 11. I don't push that beyond 3/4. So anyway, point is, you do not need a room full of kit like this to make music. In fact, these days, all you need is one of these. This morning, I took my phone, I went to the Google Play shop, and I downloaded and installed the latest version of N-Track. Now, before I became a digital audio workstation nerd, the first DAW that I used was something called N-Track when it was at version 2 on the PC. Now there's a version that's available that you can just download for free, run on your phone. It means it's got certain features crippled, but it actually works pretty well. So before everything went pear-shaped, I recorded a little piano motif, and I can play it back if I move the microphone to it. Okay, that's cool. It's got a drum kit. So I can if I go back, remember to do that, Chris. It does help. Let's go back to the beginning, hit record. I mean, for free, I think that's pretty good. It lets you save stuff to a file. You can use the phone's mic to record your vocals. And the whole thing, you know, is available for free. But that's not what we're going to be dealing with right now. So what am I going to talk about today? I'm going to talk about Windows PCs. And what I'm going to do is show you a couple of DAWs. Now, the first one I'm going to show you is the one that I actually use for making stuff. So this is Ableton Live. So same as the little end track on the phone, what I'll do is just draw a basic diagram of what all this stuff is, because it looks very intimidating and confusing sometimes. So back in the old days, when you wanted to record your music, you had a microphone and you sang into it. The microphone was connected to a mixer, which had a number of channels, so you could have different instruments like a guitar. So that's a very cheesy guitar and a set of drums. And keyboards. And then the mixer would have two channels, left and right, that would go to a tape recorder. And the tape recorder might have 2 tracks, it might have 4 tracks. If you were really lucky and you had a cassette Porta Studio, it might have 24 tracks, it might have 48 tracks. And when I was a kid starting out on this, I started finding studios that were chaining 48 track tape recorders together and making a 96 track. Thing is, all of this can now be replaced with a little red box, which is an audio interface for a computer. I actually still have a full mixer, so I still have this bit. And if I switch views, you can see it's this thing here, same sort of thing. Lots of controls for EQ and panning an individual signal from all those different instruments left and right. Volume controls for each track at the bottom, a master volume control at the side. This thing's even got submixes. Yeah, it's a lot, but if we go back to Ableton, you can see Ableton is effectively keeping all those old controls from an old mixer. You've got all the different tracks at the bottom. You've got the volume slider at the bottom to control the tracks. You've got pans left and right. And then right on the right-hand side, you've got a main slider, which is the master volume for everything. So this is one way of controlling Ableton. So what I can do, we've got a bunch of tracks on here, and we've got cello. But the way I use Ableton is to, rather than have the tracks vertically, I lay them out timeline-wise, so I can actually see things as they progress. So imagine just turning this view through 90 degrees. He said, waving his hand in front of the screen, which you can't see. Yeah, David says, I always wondered, what are tracks on a tape exactly? Well, David, they are quite literally, if you look at a piece of tape, if I draw a piece of tape, a cassette tape, which is what, 1/8 of an inch wide, effectively has a left and a right channel on one side, and then when you flip the cassette over on the other side, there's another left and a right channel. So those areas on the tape are encoded with the electric or the magnetic signal for the sound. So a stereo cassette recorder will have a side A and a side B. The old Fostex 4-tracks basically just took all 4 tracks and called them 1, 2, 3, 4, and that let you record 4 tracks. And if you were really clever about it, what you'd do is you'd record tracks 1 and 2, and then you'd record them while recording another signal and bounce them down onto tracks 3 and 4. Back in the day, all sorts of little helpful books were available for this sort of stuff. This is how long I've been doing this. It's by John Peel. Well, it's got John Peel's name on the front of it. Back in these sort of days, that was the sort of thing. In fact, that's the X15. That's the 4-tracker that I used to have. So Mel says we got a back in the day story. Absolutely. I'm an old git. I like reminiscing. And sadly, this thing is in a cupboard because it died. It'll play stuff back, but you can't rewind it, which is really annoying. There were many, many 4-track cassette recorders at the time. It was a lovely time to be making music because, all right, some of them were well over £1,000, but those machines brought the ability to make music into a whole population of musicians who'd never have made music for those, for the budget that they had to that degree. And I was one of them, and I got totally hooked by it. But of course, then computers came along, and suddenly all those magnetic tracks just became ones and zeros that you could store in computer files. And the reason N-Track is called N-Track is because you were no longer limited to 4 tracks on your tape. You could have N tracks, where N is whatever number you can think of. Okay, so check it out, ntrack.com. There's Android, there's Windows, and there's iOS. And it's well worth checking out. But now, let's go back to my Ableton session. So this is the theme tune for the show. How did I do it? As always, I started off with drums, just like the little virtual drum kit in N-Track on the phone. I have something called Superior Drummer, which is a rather spiffy and very, very large drum programming application. So I'm just using this drum kit, which is the Rocky Premier Raw. And what I can do, I have a bunch of different MIDI packs, because all the drum patterns on this are just MIDI files. And I can go to the verse for the piece of music that I want. This is the theme tune I'm using. I've got 4 different patterns that I can literally just drag and drop onto the software, onto the track. You see they're graded by intensity, so if I want something that's a little bit more restrained, I can try the version 3. So you get the idea. I mean, it's like putting a jigsaw together. Mel says GarageBand was my starter software. Yeah, GarageBand's still going strong, and a lot of people use it. So Here's my MIDI tracks that you can see. I play it. It is literally that pattern. That's a nice kick drum. I do like that. Okay, so when I'd got that down, the next thing was to add guitar, because I tend to work. I mean, this is the other thing. This is what works for me. It's not what you need to do. But the next thing that I laid down after that basic drum rhythm was some guitar. So here's my guitar. If I put the two together. Okay, so that's the first section of the song. Okay, what am I doing there? Well, what I've got, the G&L guitar, and rather than using the Marshall, this is going straight into the mixer. But I have a set of guitar pedals on the floor, which you can see down here. And in effect, that little box with the lights on it is pretending to be one of those Marshalls. So if I play the guitar, that's the verse. Mel says, I see the ocean. Yeah. As a slight diversion, because as Wood mentioned it, then let's talk about it. So this blue box, wibbly wobbly, timey wimey, is called a Moore Ocean Machine. So I put the Ocean Machine on. The Ocean Machine is 3 pedals in one box. It's a reverb and 2 echo machines, which to make it sound like this. Let's put something with a bit more reverb on it. Track or pick something with a bit more distortion on it. Back when I were a lad, reverbs came in 2 basic flavors. So let's just take this off for a second. There were basically 2 ways of getting a reverberant sound like that little machine makes back in the day. The first one was quite literally to put a loudspeaker in a room at one end with tiles all over and play the signal that you wanted the reverb on. Mel says my mic's quiet. I'm having trouble with feedback. I'm not quite sure what it is. I'll nudge it up a bit. And, if it starts howling, let me know. So, yeah, you would put a speaker in one end of a room and a microphone in the other. And you'd play the track that you wanted to put reverb on into a room, hence reverb chamber. The other great way of getting reverbs that was very popular in the 60s was that you coupled the loudspeaker to a very, very big spring, hence spring reverb. Now, all the surf guitar music from the 60s used spring reverb units, which were big, but they weren't the size, and they didn't require the recording studio to have a dedicated room set aside for them. And then, of course, computers happened again, and these days it's all done microprocessor-wise, and that means you can mess about and screw up the signal with all sorts of really interesting devices and tweaks and algorithms that a normal physical room doesn't do. And these things are called things like shimmer or glisten. So if I put the guitar back on, and I'll find a glisten reverb, and you can hear what I mean about it. This one should be in tune because it's got a Floyd Rose tremolo arm, so the strings are locked in place. He said rashly. So that's, you hear the echo, or you might hear the echo bouncing from side to side, is ping pong delay. And that peculiar noise is the shimmer reverb. So yeah, apparently you can make that sound musical. I don't see it. But that one I can use, and I have used quite a lot. Again, it's subtle, but it just gives a little bit more flavour to what the guitar's doing. Right. So, I've got some nice fancy toys, and it's a great help in getting a good guitar tone. But what do you do if you haven't got all this stuff? Mel says, how many guitars do I have? How many do I have? I've got 9 electrics. There's the stick, 2 basses, and I've got a couple of acoustics. And it's the acoustic guitar that I'm going to just go and get, because that's what we're going to deal with. What I want to talk about tonight, and we'll just settle for one thing tonight, which is how to make your guitar recordings sound a bit better. So this is my acoustic. I'll just tune it. And again, I don't buy stuff new. My aunt found this for me because my aunt used to run the Oxfam shop in Lytham St Anne's, and she rang me up one day and she said, somebody's just dropped off this acoustic guitar and it looks rather nice. Do you want it? I think it cost me 30 quid to Oxfam. So thank you, Oxfam. Because this hasn't been in here, it's in tune. More or less. Close enough for government work. Right, So what do you do to get your guitar sounding good when you're recording stuff at home? If you haven't got an amp with a headphone socket and you've got an acoustic or a mandolin or something like that, how do you get a sound like this into your digital audio workstation? Well, you're going to need a mic. Yeah, fine. But there is something else that is actually really important when you're working with acoustic instruments. And people, I don't think, pay enough attention to sorting that part of their rig out. It's headphones. Because what you can hear in the room when you're playing the guitar is not what your microphone is hearing. And I mean, everybody, when they hear their voice on tape for the first time, says, that's not what I sound like. And your guitar's the same. So by shutting out what the room is doing, so you don't hear the guitar through the room, you just hear the guitar through your headphones, it's going to help you get a much better recording of the guitar that you're playing. So put my headphones on, and what I'm now going to do is I'm going to turn off my monitors because I've got a monitor controller. I'll just show you, and prepare to snigger, because the monitor controller down here is my Mackie big knob, because it has a big knob in the middle. Okay, so my speakers are off. So now what I'm hearing in my headphones is what this Shure SM7B is picking up as I talk. But I'm not going to tweak the stand and everything else on this to pick up the guitar. What I'm going to do instead, because I did actually prepare for this, despite everything going pear-shaped earlier, I did actually prepare. Honestly, I made notes and everything. So what I have down out of sight and just to my left here is a Shure SM57, which is basically the workhorse mic. And believe me, you can never have too many mics. And you can never have too many mic stands. You should see the stack I've actually got in the corner. Right, so we've got the SM57 here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fade up the SM57 on my mixing desk so I can hear that. Hear that? So now I've got the SM57. Let's just give it a bit more welly. There we go. So now what I want to show you is how much the guitar sound changes depending on where the mic's pointing. So if I have the mic pointing at the neck, and then what happens if I turn around so that the SM57 is talking or is pointing at the guitar's sound hole? Instantly bigger, fuller sound. But I mean, you can point the microphone in different directions, even with the head of the mic in the same position, and you will get different sounds. So if I turn the mic round, So it's now pointing towards the front of the guitar's body. And rather than using, I'll keep using my fingers, so I'm playing the same sort of stuff. Huge difference, says Mel. Yeah, absolutely. Clonk. Yeah, try not to hit your guitar on the desk. This thing has so many chips out of it. I mean, its intonation is all over the place because it was in the shop window in the Oxfam shop for a few weeks in direct sunlight, and that's not good for a guitar. It really isn't. But yeah, and if I move further away, listen, what a difference again. So yeah, huge difference in sound, and that's just with one mic. So it's not playing around with loads and loads of different bits of kit. It's literally just where you put the microphone compared with what's making the sound. And it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same deal with your voice. If I'm right in close to the SM7, it will sound very different from when I move further away, to the point where the SM57 starts picking up the sound instead. Mel says it's okay. Willie Nelson's guitar is all banged up too. It's the instruments that have a few battle scars that are the ones that you really grow attached to. I mean, I saw a blues guitarist called Rory Gallagher many times. Sadly, he's no longer with us. That guy's Strat. I've seen him at gigs put it on the floor with the strings on the floor, so face down, and then kick it across the stage. And boy, did that guitar look like it. But it sounded amazing. Okay, so if you can afford it, the SM51 is a fantastic way of starting out recording stuff. There's a reason they use these things on the White House press conferences, because they're built like tanks. If you're doing vocals, however, bear with me a second. You may recognize this. So this is the Shure SM58, which is, again, a dynamic vocal mic like this, like this. This is what pretty much every rock band uses on stage, and that's for a very, very important reason, which I will now demonstrate. So it sounds great when I've got my nose over the top of the grill. But if I stand over here, you can barely hear, you can hear the SM7, but if I turn the SM7 down, very, very quietly, this thing has the most incredible roll-off of sensitivity. It literally does not pick up your voice if you hold it at arm's length. It's gone. So the mic like this is used for rock bands where the singer is standing in front of a wall of those, because the singer can quite easily get a good vocal performance here but this won't pick up the Marshalls. So dynamic mics are all very much the same, but they're not the only type of microphone available. So there's also condenser mics. Now, I'm not going to go into the technical differences between a dynamic mic and a condenser mic. The main difference that I find with it is that condenser mics are profoundly more sensitive, and they also require power. So this desk has what's called 48-volt phantom power on it. It's called phantom power because something like this can be, and I just connected it to the desk, and it's absolutely fine with it. It just ignores it completely. That is not the case with some other types of microphone. So over here, this microphone is older than I am. So this is a beautiful ribbon mic that used to belong to my father. And it's a Reslow ribbon mic. And apparently, I am told that the Cavern Club in Liverpool basically used all of these as the stage microphones. So the Beatles would have used Reslows when they performed at the Cavern Club. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. It's got a pathetically low output, so I need to whack the volume up profoundly on the desk before I can hear anything from this. Also, connecting this to a desk with phantom power, if you had an XLR mic on it, I don't. It's got a honking big 1/4-inch jack on it. It would just melt. So do not connect ribbon mics to phantom power. But Mel says, so cool looking. Yeah, they do. I mean, it's a gorgeous piece of kit. It's just a pity the rubber connector on the stand actually perished. But this is, good, solid cast iron covered in Bakelite, Armalite Armalite? What's this? Hammerite. That's the stuff. So ribbon mics are like a little outlier of the microphone ecosystem. The other principal microphone that you can get, in fact, I'm going to leave that where it is, but I'm just going to enable it. So let's go to the Zoom Q8. Is this thing, which is a large diaphragm condenser mic. This one's a Rode NT1A. And as you can hear, I sound completely different on it. This is also very good for guitar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to faff around with the stand and lower it, and then we'll put that guitar through it, and you can see what it sounds like on this. Okay, that should be better. Let's give this one a go with the guitar. Notice also I'm further away. Again, much brighter sound, much more emphasis on the higher frequencies. And it also, I don't know if you can hear it, but it's also picking up the room itself. Now this room, because I've got a honking big bed in it, is pretty dead acoustically, but even so, you can hear the room sound when I clap. At least I hope you can. And David says also catches more noise. Yeah, exactly. So you can hear the rattle of the strings. I mean, if I play with a pick, you might even be able to hear the pick noise as I play. Let's try it. Yeah, there's a bit of pick sounds, David says. Good. I'm glad you can hear it. So, hang on, let's go back to my main webcam. And we'll turn the Rode down, because I can even now, talking into the SM7, on these, I can hear the Rode actually still picking up my my vocals. So if I wind that down, suddenly I've gone back to talk radio mode. So play with mics when you're recording your stuff. Oh, Wobby's here. Hello, Wobby. Good to see you. Thank you for tuning in. When you're recording stuff, don't just stick with one microphone. Try different mics. Try the one on your phone. I mean, I've got a box of the things. Most of these came from, well, Mel and I had this bet that I could couldn't write a song with one of these. This is a Fisher-Price microphone. So if I turn it on, the battery's dead. Nope. Here we go.
Hey friend, let's pretend I know what we can be. Show me your favorite rock star moves. Come on and rock with me.
Yeah, I have yet to address that challenge. Shall we just leave it at that? David says, did it just go yippee? Yes, it did. It is that sad. Some of it's even worse. So what have we got in this box of goodies? Well, I've actually used this for recording songs back in the day before I could afford an SM50 ever. This is a Labtech dynamic microphone, so it's the same effective design as this, but yeah, nothing close to it. This was £5 from Tandy's, but I've made songs with it and occasionally get feedback even with something like this. There are, well, so I've no idea who Kobe are. Presumably they are supposed to, if you've had a few and you've not got your glasses on, maybe you think it's a Sony. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff in there. SM57. There is one other type of mic which I use when I'm getting truly weird. Wobby says, "Oh, Tandy." Yep. Remember that brand? This is a realistic piezo microphone. So it's a piezo electric effect. It's a plate mic. So basically, and again, this was about £10 from Tandy's. It's battery powered. And the idea is that you blue tack it or gaffer tape it to a flat surface that then resonates in response to loud noises. Wobby has 2 of these. Good for you. I don't use this enough, to be honest. They are huge fun because they're just bizarre. What else have we got in here? Yeah, something off a dictation machine. If you've ever bought cassette recorders, you may still have some of these types of mics kicking around the house. If they've got the little mini jacks on them, they will work with your laptop. Plugging them in shouldn't damage them. And I mean, to be honest, these things don't owe me anything. So even if they did explode or melt or something, I wouldn't lose any sleep. Rather than going on about the rest of this Ableton set, I'm thinking about what you do with your guitar or your microphone or your voice or whatever else when you've recorded it, or as you record it, you've got the mic. If we go back to my little... So we've dealt with this section. So like I was saying, it's about moving around. Either you move around or you move the microphone around. Try different mic positions, see what works, and use headphones to listen to the room. So here's my record producer at the top, he's the big guy, so he's in charge, or the big lady, and so she's in charge. They're making the creative decisions because they've got the headphones that are coming out of the desk. They can hear what's going on much better than your ears can in the room. Somebody in the control room, when you're in a recording studio, makes the creative decisions on what to adjust with the mixer, because when you're in the recording room with the drums and the guitarist and the bass player who's just turned his bass amp up because it's obviously not loud enough at the setting that everybody else decided he should play at. Yes, I'm a bass player. I've been there. I know what that's like. Mel says regarding that microphone, I still think we should Fisher Price the shit out of a song. I'm down for it. Okay, you're on. We'll do this on 5090, and then everybody can gaze with disbelief at the sounds of... I'm going to sample that yippee. That yippee, for a start, is crying out to be sampled. And yes, exactly. Not all producers are men. I will probably talk about the producer role in a separate episode because it's something that fascinates me. And there are two completely diametrically opposed qualities that you have to have as a good producer. But we'll leave that for another day. So back to our recording studio people. They've got their song. They've got their signal into the mixer. They're happy with the sound. They might like pick noise or plectrum noise. They might like more bright strings. They might like a mellower sound. They might like a bit of room noise, or they might like it totally dry. I mean, in terms of room noise, I have a pedal for that. So I get room noise digitally. But I've actually got that under control this week rather than it switching on and off by itself. So let's leave that off. Right. Getting that signal out of the mixer into the tape recorder. So I've talked about doors, and you might be saying, yeah, I'm not going to drop however many £100 it is to buy Ableton. All right, there is a trial version called Ableton Live Lite, which you can download and try out and see if you like it. But over the past year or so, the ecosystem for digital audio workstations has changed completely. And if you do a search for free DAWs, you will find several really good ones. Traction, who do a lot of wobbies, way ahead of me, and I started with this many years ago, is Cakewalk, which is now run by BandLab. So I literally installed that this morning because I wanted to sort of see how it's changed from when I first ran Cakewalk on a Pentium PC back in 1994. And I used it primarily back then for creating MIDI files. I have rather a lot of VSTs, and it is currently sorting its way through them. Mel says, I remember Cakewalk. I have fond memories of it. It was a wonderful, wonderful package. So it's detected my audio interface, which is the Focusrite. I basically have a choice of one thing. So quite why it's giving me a drop-down dialog box, I don't know. Please select the MIDI inputs and outputs you want to use. Well, I want to use all of these. Outputs. We'll use those. Oh, right, yeah, because I'm running Ableton at the same time, which is currently talking to the push. It can't talk to the push, so that's not a problem. So let's start off with a basic workspace. Well, this is all rather intuitive, isn't it? So basically, I can start with a basic track, a 4-track setup, a 16-track setup, guitar amps, vocals, or an empty project. You can guess which one I'm going to go for, aren't you? Yep, the 16-track. Let's see what we end up with. Creating user interface. Oh, look. So again, if we drop back and compare with Ableton, it's got the controls on the left-hand side rather than right-hand side. But if I just open up the guitar track, so what have we got? What I've got in Ableton is this is an audio track. So there are two different types of tracks on most DAWs. Either a MIDI track, where it uses a virtual software instrument to create sounds based on MIDI information that is stored as something that has the delightful name of a piano roll. So if I open it up, so that's a C. So if the little headphones clicked. So if I tap on that, nothing happens. Why doesn't anything happen? Probably because Cakewalk has taken. All right, yeah. I'll talk you through piano rolls some other time. We'll let Cakewalk do its thing at the moment. But basically, you've got whether you can actually hear the track or monitoring it, or whether it's just handled automatically. Volume, pan left and right. So it's center at the moment. That's 50 right to 50 left or anywhere in between. Double click on that to set it back to 0. I've got two effects sends, channel A and channel B. Normally you'd have channel A for reverb and channel B for echo, but me being me, I've got everything set to reverb. So that means that basically if I enabled it, 4 dB lower than the actual signal for that track is now going to this reverb track. And if I open that and move that out of the way, this is just using Ableton's default reverb. So it's got a decay time of 4.15 seconds. So it's quite a decent reverb. So if I just solo that track and the reverb, you can hear what it sounds like. Now, if I take the guitar away, we just hear the reverb send. So you get the idea. Oh, it's finished. Right, so we're good to go. So what we have is effectively the same sort of thing. Mute a track, solo a track, so it's the only thing that's playing. Enable it for recording. So if I arm track 1, I'm assuming that means it's armed. And then I can add a track of effects. There's a show the rack menu. What have we got? Oh, loads of things. So it's picked up basically all my VSTs from Ableton. So if I wanted, I've got a reverb there. I've got Isotopes Insight, which will analyze the track and tell me if it's market worthy or not. Loads of different EQs, loads of different stuff, and some new ones, which I'm presuming come with Cakewalk itself, which is not bad for free, is it? So you can see the faders on there. That's actually picking up my voice. Mel says this looks like decent software. It always has been, mate. It was back in the 90s. It got bought by various companies who didn't really do a lot with it, so it stagnated for a time. But the folks who now own Cakewalk really seem to have a handle on things, and I mean that control surface at the top looks almost Pro Toolsy to me. This looks pretty good. So what I'm thinking of, right, one last thing. We'll go back to the SM57 and I'll record a guitar track. But what I'm going to do is, if I can find out how to do it, there we go. I'm presuming there's a click track somewhere. Anybody used metronome during playback? That sounds like it ought to be a click. Let's try that. Ha! That'll do, won't it? Wobby says, I love it. I used it all through Sonar, have used it since the demise of Cool Edit Pro. Gosh, I remember that. So what I should now be able to do, rewind right to the beginning. Oh, that's interesting. Right, so we've got, that's actually quite nice. That's more like a video editing scrubbing bar. Right, so if I go back to my SM57 and grab the guitar, we can see what it sounds like. Mel says, how intuitive is Cakewalk? I really like the UI. Back in the day, it actually looked a lot more complicated than this version. I mean, for something that's free, this looks really slick. So Wobby says you can have the mixer view at the bottom. Oh, right. Is that here? Ho, ho, ho! Look at that. Right. Let's try recording something. So we've got that at the beginning. 120 beats PM because scroll up more, Wobby says. Okay. Well, no, not that. Ah, it's proper faders. Look at that. Oh my goodness me. So of course, if you've got multiple monitors, which I have, I presume you can just squirt that out to a separate. Yes, look, you can down there. Undock it, and I could chuck that. I could chuck that on my other monitor and pretend I'm Trevor Horn. Oh, I like this. Oh, I'm going to have fun with this. Yeah, totally going to have fun with this. Right, what did I just docked it, didn't I? Let's undock it again. Let's dock it down at the bottom. That's pretty intuitive. Yeah. I see what I'm doing. I like this. I really like this. Okay, this is HFO's tip for this evening's stream. If you want to set yourself up with a free DAW that isn't going to cost you anything, but which actually does what a DAW ought to do, he said, without ever recording a note on it. This is looking promising. So let's try recording something. That sounds pretty good to me. Let's hear it back. So, can I edit a clip so that as with all these things, I'm a guy. Oh, look, you get to split a clip, to stretch a clip, to crop a clip, drag the left or right clip edge to adjust this. That's what I want to do. Oh, there we go. Look at that. Okay, so I can now move that to the beginning of a bar. And, I see. And then I use that and move it back to there. Oh, that's pretty intuitive, isn't it? And I can change that so it's actually on the beat. So let's try that. Rewind. So now what I can do, I'm going to turn the metronome back on. I can do a line over the top of that, can't I? Why can't I hear what the other thing was doing? Oh, I see. I'd still got the other track armed. That's interesting. You can arm multiple tracks for recording. That could come in useful, couldn't it? Right, so I've disarmed track 1, so I'm not wiping over track 1 when I record track 2, so I should now be able to hear it. So if we go back to the beginning and... Right, so let's try that again. All right. Completely messed up the end of that, but now I should have 2 tracks that are in sync with each other. That's pretty good, isn't it? Let me just put this down. Turn the SM57 off. So I have another line of amps underneath the desk. So this is actually what I use for recording my bass and the stick. So I've got a little Phil Jones. I don't know if you can see that there. So this is my Phil Jones briefcase combo. It's the size of a briefcase, strangely enough. It's some ridiculous number of watts. It's got Kevlar speaker cones in it, and it's frightening how loud something that small and that light is. Superb little thing. Mel says, not really loving the colours, and Wobby says, you can change all the colours. Literally, that is the first time I've used this version of the software. It's the first time I've used Cakewalk in 20 years. And to just go, oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, really good. So if you've not got a DAW yet, that is a great way of starting. One thing that I would... So you saw me trim the start of a track. This is something that if you're doing 50/90, folks, please give your song a listen back before you upload it. Make sure that there are no bumps or clatters like there are obviously in mine that I've just done with this. And you can edit the beginning of the track out of the way. Another free piece of software for editing an audio file, converting it from the WAV or whatever else your DAW has rendered it at, and making MP3s, adding metadata tags and everything else. Get yourself a copy of Audacity. Even with Ableton, I use Audacity as a final quality check. So when I render something out in Ableton, I render it out as a WAV file, and I then load the WAV file into Audacity. So I'm going to open a WAV file. So let's do this. So you can zoom into the waveform. For a start, just looking at, let's make it fit the window. There we go. So for a start, Audacity shows you the waveform in a really simple way. You can see that the waveform doesn't reach the top of the bottom of the waveform display. There's plenty of headroom. There was something that took place about 20 years ago now called the Loudness Wars, where records just got louder and louder and louder and louder and louder. And a record from that time, and I'm going to load. Let's close that one. I'm going to load a track from. Well, it's an MP3, so it's been compressed. So I'm going to go to my music library, and I am going to load a track by a band from the southwest of England, here in England. They're called Muse. And I'm going to open a track called Take a Bow, which is the first track on Black Holes and Revelations. Have a look at the waveform on this. Ha! That is ridiculous. That is just... There's no subtlety in that at all, is there? Don't do that. It will sound loud, but your ears will not thank you for it. One of my other favourite bands is a band called Rush. And Rush, if I didn't mean to do that, if I open a track of Rush's from an album of theirs called Vapor Trails, I want to show you something. So here's one little victory from the original version of Vapor Trails. It's not subtle, is it? I have actually listened to this album, Vapor Trails, less than a dozen times because my ears couldn't stand it. It is that wearing to listen to. And fair play to Rush, it was not their decision to master the album looking like that or sounding like that. And they were fortunate enough that they were in the position a few years later to go back into the studio with the master tapes for that album and redo it. And this is the new version. It's still loud, but there's light and shade in there. There are notches. So going back to Ableton, I use a plugin in Ableton, which is on the master track, which is called Ozone. So Ozone listens to your piece of music and it's a way of homogenizing your music, so it's all at more or less the same relative volume. It has a bandwidth, it has relative loudness at different frequencies that fit the genre of music that you're looking for. And it also has something called a maximizer. So you can see down here the target there says 14.8 LUFS. And I have completely blanked on what LUFS stands for. But effectively, the music industry now said, all right, look, lads, you're being silly. We're going to agree target loudness thresholds for different genres of music. And in fact, they were forced into doing it by Apple, because Apple actually added something to iTunes that listened to how loud, what the LUFS volume was of your track, and adjusted it and made it better to listen to. And that killed the loudness wars. It's one of the few great things that Apple have achieved in the last 20 years was stopping people making complete pig's ears of albums by making them louder, wanting them to sound louder than everybody else's album. David says, same thing happened to Nevermore. Their Enemies of Reality album sounded horrible on release. They remastered it a few years later and sold copies for like $5. There you go. It was a bad move at the time, and it was fairly obvious it was going to be a bad move, but you can see what happened. So this track is actually quite shouty. So the maximizer is kicking in all the time. So I've got other tracks where the threshold will be down at sort of minus 18, minus 20 dB. Right. So as again, let's just go through those. So this is rock. There's the frequency response for fine. Those are my 4 bandwidths for the broad setting. I'll show you the orchestral one because it is quite interesting how different it is. There you go. And again, there. Mids way up at the top, or low mids way up at the top. And then if we go back to reggae, it's much wider on the bottom end. Ooh, I misses. Right, let's go back to rock. So if I got it broad, 4 basic bandwidth settings to aim for, fine. That's the curve I'm looking for. So if we render this out, this will now be the whole track. It'll be all of the tracks enabled. And what we'll do, we'll call it the demo. Yes, I want to replace it. Let's watch that total balance control curve. That's a bit better, isn't it? That's actually pretty good all the way through. And if I go broad, it should... No, it won't let me go to broad. it's actually in the ballpark for the entire song, which maybe my ears are getting better. I don't know. I've been doing this with Ableton for over a decade now. Oh, it's just dropped out. See, this was what I was saying earlier, that I might get it spot on at one point in the track, but 2 or 3 minutes later, it's all over the place. And lo and behold, oh, there it is. It's coming back. It's dropping back. So it's basically the orchestral section does not conform to the rock frequency curve, which is kind of what you'd expect, really. Nearly there. I'm actually quite surprised how close that stays in. That's pretty good. Right, quick burst of one of the reverbs spitting out the last thing in its buffer. Let's go that down. Let's close that. No, let's open the new version. So again, yeah. So it's just nicely peaking at 0.3 dB above the top, which is what the maximizer wanted to do. So if I zoom in and go to the beginning, there's no count in, so it just starts. Now, normally I would listen to the whole track play all the way through to make sure there are no skips or jumps in the render if something went awry. But in this case, we'll just go through to the end, and it hasn't rendered the whole thing. It's literally stopped at the end, so I don't get the cymbal crash dying away. It's 50-90. Yeah. So here's one I did earlier. See, normally if I go back to live, and the reason, because I couldn't actually see what I was doing, if we go back, it's the drums there that actually stop on that measure. So if I zoom in there, so they actually stop on the halfway 3 beats into bar 49. So that's when the render stopped. But what I would actually have done when I rendered it for reals is I would have selected a good 2 or 3 bars afterwards, because there is a cymbal decay. And if I play you this version, which is now loaded, so pretend this is the one I've just rendered out. So we jump in, we make it longer. So this time when I play the end, and I usually wait until I can't hear a thing, and at that point I count for a second, and then I end the track. So at that point it's 1 minute 26. And this one, I think I've already trimmed the beginning off. Yeah, I have. So yeah, when you render something out, get yourself a copy of Audacity, install it on your machine. It's available for Linux. It's available for Mac. It's available for Windows, because Windows is what I'm using. It is really, really useful in all sorts of ways. And I'm going to show you one way which I only discovered this week, which it is really clever for. So say you want to use a piece of audio from something in your track. What you can do is you can use Audacity and the Windows Audio Service application program interface, and the Focusrite with loopback. So now what I can do is, and I mean, this goes to show the making a mockery of of pretty much any copyright protection or anything else. I can go to, say, YouTube, and I can find an artist who I kind of like his music. You know, he needs to work on his style a bit, but I can basically play a piece of his music and record it with Audacity. Lo and behold, Audacity has recorded the whole thing. So if I go back, I was astonished by that, and actually quite surprised. I didn't think you could do that. So if you're ever looking for sampling dialogue from a film, say, or a news report, or anything else like that, Audacity is a really good way of doing it, especially if you've got a Windows machine. I am informed by our friend Georgie in Paris that you can do the same thing using Soundflower on a Mac. I will probably be trying to cast around for an excuse to doing that, and using sampled and found. And Wobby says SoundForge. Oh yeah, well, I still have SoundForge. Look, I can't even remember what version this is. Sony upgraded it, and on the machine downstairs, I've got a much newer version of it, and it's terrible. So on this one, I've just left it at whatever version this is. Right. So I've covered Cakewalk as a DAW as a way of getting started on your 5090 adventures without spending any money. Just install it on the machine that you've already got. If you haven't got a machine, you've got your phone, and N-Track 9 will let you record in more or less the same way as before, and it will do audio, and it synchronizes. What's really, Mel and I were chatting earlier about latency on different DAWs and different equipment. When you first start using N-Track on the phone, it basically pings loudly like a submarine sonar to check the latency between tracks and just goes, oh yeah, that's 91 milliseconds latency. Okay, I'll compensate for that. And just does it all for you, which is extraordinary. For a free piece of software, that's quite spiffy, I thought. All right, so phone or computer. When you've finished your software, save your project. Always save your work. Save your work after every take, in fact. Render it out in whatever format you want. Make sure that you've got the tops and the tails to allow for the decay at the end and reverb to die away. With Ableton, if I hit A, I can actually automate things like song tempo or volume control. So what I can do is that I can select an area. I've got volume control enabled. I just right click. I want a nice smooth curved fade, and that will then fade away to 0. Automatically, and then I'd then render that out to 130, although as you saw in Audacity it actually goes quiet by 126. And most importantly, in terms of what we talked about today, headphones. Listen to the room. Pay attention to what your mic's hearing, not what your ears are hearing. Wearing headphones cuts off your ears from the room and lets you hear what the mic hears. And that's the important bit. You don't want to spend hours doing a lovely crafted track and then find it sounds rubbish because the mic's picked up you coughing or breathing or drinking your lemon squash while you thought you were recording your masterpiece. Headphones, particularly if you can get closed back ones that really enclose your ears, that cut you off from the rest of the room. That's what you want for studio work. So close back rather than open back. Open back will probably give you a more accurate representation of what the sound is, but when you're recording it, I think it's more important at that stage just to focus on what the mic can hear, not what you can hear. So always pay attention to what you can hear in the mic, not what you're hearing in the room, because the mic's the one that's doing the work, getting the sound into your system. It's not your ears doing that. So make sure that the mic is doing the best job it can. And if you can afford a decent mic, get a decent mic. I did a course with Berkeley a few years ago on audio production, which was a really, really good course. It was free. It's something like 6 weeks. I've still got the notebook up here, which is, if I just show you the sort of notes that I wrote during it. So there are profound amounts of technical detail that I recorded because I'm a nerd. So, there's entire pages on how delay and pitch work, and modulated short delays, choruses, flanges, delays, stereo width, and then, a whole section on how synthesizers work. Oh, look, an ADSR envelope. It really, really fascinating stuff. And as you can see, I got really, really into it. What I will do, rather than doing it now, I will post a link for the course if it's still available on Berkeley. I'll put it on, because what I'm going to do with these, they'll be on Twitch for 60 days as is normal, but I'm also going to upload these to YouTube. So I'll put a link to the Berkeley course that I did, if it still exists, and you can check it out. They run it a few times a year. The instructor for it was superb, really, really sharp guy, newest stuff, and really good. Completely different experience to the course that I did a few months later on a piece of music production software, and I will leave it at that. It was not very good. So David says, you have that Denitas notes. Thank you. That is due to my chemistry teacher, a Mr. Jones, who insisted when I was doing chemistry at school that we all wrote his dictated notes, because that was pretty much what chemistry was. It was him dictating notes to the class, and we wrote them down and occasionally did experiments. And he would check our handwriting. And if it wasn't up to scratch, he would give us dead legs or hit us. Because, hey, it was the 70s and teachers could be psychos. Is it any wonder I came out of my teenage years with PTSD? But that's another story. Okay, it's coming up on, in fact, it's gone, 11 o'clock. Where the hell did the last 2 hours go? Well, I know where some of them went. It went in absolute chaos getting this messed up, but we got there in the end. Have any of you guys got questions before I wind things up at this point? Or is there anything that I could have explained a bit better, or you're going, what was he on about there? I'll give you a couple of ticks to say yay or nay. But yeah, I enjoyed that. I hope that it will be of use to somebody who stumbles across this on YouTube. Mel says, I think you were pretty clear. Thanks, mate. That's much appreciated. Okay. Good explanations. Right, thank you. In that case, I think we'll call it a night for tonight. I know some people have things to do tomorrow morning. I don't. So it's been good hanging out. Thank you for hanging out with me. Thank you for bearing with me when it all went pear-shaped at the beginning. It's really, really been interesting. Wobby says, looking forward to sharing notes with you on Cakewalk. I think I'm going to at least spend a week where I'm just going to drop Ableton, and I'm going to do my tracks for 5090 using Cakewalk, just as an adventure to see what I can do with it and what works and what advantages it might give me for certain genres or stuff over Ableton. And yeah, I like the user interface. In fact, I think I kind of prefer the user interface to Ableton's, which is, yeah, the whole user experience in Ableton. I get where they're coming from, but it's a bit strange. Mel says, blasphemy. In fact, she didn't even say it like that. She said it like this. Blasphemy. So, yeah, okay. I might retract that after I've played with Cakewalk for a few days. But until that point, thank you for staying with me through this. I will be streaming, as usual, on Thursday at 7:30 British summertime. which will be more about me noodling and just my latest discoveries. And hey, check this out on the stuff that David in chat has just said, that is exactly what she sounded like. Well, there you go. And Mel says, don't forget the theremin. How could I? Here's a little teaser for you for Thursday, especially for David. What do this and this, which is Safe as Milk by Captain Beefheart, and this and this have in common? All will be revealed on Thursday at 7:30 BST on Twitch TV/Headfirst Only. So please come and join me. Until then, stay well, stay sane, and stay safe, and have a good week. So cheers, everybody.